So it looks like the fancy new Traitor Guardsmen are getting a datasheet for 40k. The standard cultists have some serious competition on their hands from this all-new flavour of expendable worshippers. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Traitor Guard, and it seems that these particular renegades are finally getting some 40k rules again, this time back in the standard Chaos Space Marine Codex, kind of as an alternative to cultists with some fancier gear and different options. I was quite curious to see how Games Workshop might implement Traitor Guard rules for Warhammer 40k. They released this Kill Team Blooded kit, obviously more aimed at Kill Team than 40k, but a whole load of fairly awesome Renegade Guardsman sculpts, something that's been in the background of Warhammer 40k for a long time, but rarely ever realised in actual plastic kits. I think the kit itself is quite fun, 10 standard Traitor Guardsmen with the standard options that you might get in an Imperial Guard regiment, plasma guns, melter guns and grenade launchers and things. A few other fun details like that breach a riot shield type thing and a trench club, and the box also comes with a traitor commissar and a heavily mutated ogre as well. In general, these were really quite well received by the community, and Games Workshop does sell them individually now, either £35, €45 or $60. You can get it cheaper through Element Games, linked in the video description if you live in the UK. As usual, any sales through that, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics, and it doesn't cost you any more when you buy. In any case, Games Workshop has brought out 40k rules for these, a datasheet for Codex Chaos Space Marines, though I do wonder whether or not there might be some sort of system in the new Guard Codex that might allow you to field these as more standard Guardsmen. That might be quite cool if they did so, but is definitely just pure speculation at this point. The datasheets that they've published over on Warhammer Community are one datasheet for the Traitor Guardsman squad, and then one datasheet for the Traitor Commissar and Ogrin, named a Traitor Enforcer. At first glance, I do think that the Traitor Guardsman squad does look really quite usable, even in competitive games. It's a troops choice that's always a good start, and units of them come in squads of 10 and cost 60 points. The only options that actually cost any additional cost are the Plasma Pistol and Power Sword, both costing 5 points each. As a basic troops choice, that does mean that they cost 10 points more than the Cultists at 50 points, but they do bring quite a lot of advantages. Their stat line's fairly similar to the Cultists, but they do get a couple of small upgrades. Their leadership 7 on the Sergeant and 6 on the regular guys, and they do go up to a 5+ save, which will genuinely help them out against AP 0 and AP -1 fire. Each Guardsman is equipped with a lasgun and frag grenades, and they're led by a Traitor Sergeant who gets an extra attack, and they get an improvised blade that they can swap out with a Power Sword and Plasma Pistol, or a Bolt Gun. Keywords wise, they are for Codex Chaos Space Marines, as they've got that Traitoris Astartes keyword present in the new book. They do also basically have the same standard keywords as a normal cultist mob might have. They do have the Legion keyword, though they won't get a trait, and they do get the cultist keyword as well, which locks them out of certain options. In the Chaos Codex though, cultist troops can field attachments and do get obsec, both of which are pretty good things for these guys. Having slightly better flak armor isn't bad or anything, but I think by far the best thing for these is their extra choices of war gear, and they actually get more special weapons than I might have expected. You can have up to 3 Traitor Guardsmen replace their lasgun for a flamer, grenade launcher, melter gun, plasma gun, or sniper rifle. None of these appear to cost any additional points whatsoever, kind of similar to the current guard sets. So just off the bat, it would seem to me that the melter gun and plasma gun will be basically auto-include, really quite good damage dealers that can actually threaten elite infantry. And then I think each of the rest have their merits, a bit more anti-infantry up close with the flamer, a bit more long-range flexibility with a grenade launcher though nothing outstanding damage-wise, or a single sniper shot with a cultist sniper rifle, which is interesting that it gets an AP -1 now, kind of similar to the Eldar Ranger sniper rifles, and I strongly suspect that that's going to be a change that's going to come in the Guard Codex as well. It's quite cool that you basically get 3 different special weapons all baked into the squad, though unfortunately you can't make any brutal plasma death squads or anything, as you're not allowed to spam any of the choices more than once. Otherwise, for options, the squad gets a Voxcaster for free. This one counts as being within 24-inch range of the Enforcer's leadership buff, which we'll get onto. And then there's a few options for the Sergeant. They can either take a Bolt Pistol or Plasma Pistol instead of the Las Pistol, replace the improvised blade that's AP -1 with either a Chainsword or a Power Sword. I'd say probably the Chainsword for the additional attack might be better than the improvised blade if you're looking to truly optimise everything. Or you can choose to swap the improvised blade for a Bolt Gun, which I suspect might well be winding up to be the better choice overall, seeing as the squad's a lot better at range than in melee. Overall, you do get quite a cool and rather shooty little squad. Take a bolt gun, maybe a sniper rifle, melter gun and plasma gun. and you wind up with a surprisingly threatening unit for cheap chaff troops. We'll compare them to Cultists in just a second, but I do think that these guys have some serious advantages. Otherwise, the second datasheet for the squad that we got is the one for the Enforcer and his mutated Ogre and friends. Both of these I think are really cool models, to be honest, though I feel like they're perhaps being let down by Games Workshop's rules for them here. Points wise, they're an Elite's Choice character unit, and you either have 45 points just for the Enforcer by himself, or an extra 65 points if you also tack on the Ogre and Bodyguard, who can lend a little bit more toughness and a bit of muscle to proceedings. The Enforcer stat line is pretty much what you'd expect for a guard equivalent character: 4 wounds at toughness 3, he gets 3 attacks in combat with a power fist, and has a 5+ invul save with his refractor field. I guess he basically is the equivalent of a Chaos Commissar. The only thing that he does for nearby Traitor Guard units is his forward for the Dark Gods rule, a leadership buff that means that when a nearby Traitor Guardsmen squad fails a morale test, they just lose the original model and they don't test for combat attrition. I think that basically represents him blamming one of the guard squad and having the rest of them fall into line. It's not nothing, but it's just kind of situational that you might save a couple of 6-point infantry perhaps. It seems kind of rare that you get to 45 points worth of value out of this guy, and it's almost certainly better just to invest in more Traitor Guard squads with more fancy special weapons and things. For the extra 65 points, the Ogre is a fair bit more expensive, but his rules are quite fun at least. He's really quite a big and meaty character, pretty tough with 6 wounds at toughness 5 and -1 damage, and at least fairly handy in combat as well, with 6 attacks at strength 7, AP 1 and damage 2, with an extra attack with his big mutated claw thing, which gets him 1 extra attack at strength 6, AP 2 and damage 3. I do wonder with that Wall of Muscle rule, that gives him -1 damage, I do feel that that's almost certainly going to be a -1 damage for Ogrins in the Guard Codex. Finally, the Ogrin also comes with the big target rule. This basically means that he is a bodyguard for the Traitor Enforcer and not the other way around. You have to take damage on him first. He does make the unit a toughness 5 though when they're targeting him, so it's quite handy when he's around. Overall, with the points cost that they're at the moment though, I think that this unit's kind of placed quite firmly in the fun and fluffy set of rules rather than anything particularly competitive. The leadership buff just isn't enough to justify the Enforcer, and while the Ogrin isn't terrible in terms of raw melee might for the points, I still don't think he exactly competes with a Master of Executions within the Chaos Codex. Still though, I think it is fun that Games Workshop did bother to give them rules, and I guess if you really wanted to use the Ogrin in competitive lists, you could well use him to stand in for a spawn or something. I think that would still work pretty nicely. Outside the core datasheets as well, these guys could pick up a few boosts from elsewhere in the Chaos Codex, though I must admit I think most of the time they'll just be used as chaff infantry units with low investment. They can go and hold the line on objectives, maybe do some actions and ping out a few heavy weapon shots, and then die diligently for the Black Crusade, while you save most of the good buffs for the actual Chaos Space Marine units. First up, for one disadvantage, as Cultists they do have the Mere Mortals rule. If you're fielding them in a Chaos Space Marines detachment, you do need an equal number of Chaos Space Marine core units to be able to field them. Though unless you're going absolutely mad with these guys, I don't think that's usually going to be the biggest problem. A lot of Chaos lists might like to include a unit of Terminators, Havocs or Chosen or something, so getting a squad or two of these into the troop section doesn't seem like the biggest deal at all. As I said, I'd largely just let these guys do the grunt work and the dying without too much support, though I guess at least theoretically, if you did want to make them more dangerous, you could support them with that new Dark Commune choice. That allows them to reroll hit rolls of 1, gives them extra leadership, and maybe even could give them prescience if they don't have better targets to use that on. Otherwise, there's a couple of Cultist stratagems from the Codex, that 1 CP one to allow your core units to shoot into an ongoing Cultist combat. That one could be quite good if it makes sense to keep the enemy tied up, though a lot of the time it might make more sense to drop the unit back. Otherwise, there is one called Ritual Offerings to kill a unit for +1 to hit for the rest of the game. I guess that could be kind of meaningful when you've got plasma guns and melter guns, but even in ideal circumstances, it does feel a bit niche when applied to a 60-point unit. Legions-wise, the Cultists don't get Legion traits or anything, but a few of them do have some interesting options for Cultists at least. Plenty of the synergies tend to be a little bit more melee focused, but a couple of the more interesting ones are Iron Warrior's 2CP Cannon Fodder one. That means that a unit can't be targeted if they have a unit in front of them. These guys could be a little bit more hardy screens with their 5+ armor. And I think the Alpha Legion Warlord trait one is quite interesting. They can give a unit +1 to hit and extra AP when shooting, which again when applied to a bunch of fun special weapons isn't the worst thing in the world, even if it's probably not the most sensible damage dealer strategy to build around. So overall, I do think that the unit is quite interesting though. and it's quite fun to have another interesting cultist choice for Chaos Space Marines to fill out their trooper selections with. These guys will really be competing with both the standard cultist mobs and the accursed cultists. I think I'd really see them as closest in role though to the standard cultists, an option for some very cheap chaff that can do actions and things, and it's just the decision whether or not you spend the extra 10 points to upgrade them to these guys and grab yourself a 5+ armor save, better leadership, and most importantly 3 fun special weapons. At least on paper, I do think that the trade-off could easily be worth the points. Between the flak armor and leadership, I feel like the unit seems to pretty much even out and being just as durable for the points cost, even though they cost more. And for the special weapons, I feel that usually 3 of them is going to be worth it when they only cost the 10 point extra in terms of damage. It could be pretty good for allowing them to actually contribute a little bit to the game while they're sat on home field objectives, and potentially give them a little bit more firepower to repel enemies that try and take it off them. I think they've done pretty well with adding this unit to the Chaos roster, to be honest. It seems usable and doesn't invalidate the cultist mob. Sometimes you might just want the absolute cheapest models that you can to sit on an objective and not do much. I guess otherwise the only major things that are going for the standard cultist mobs are the option for melee weapons and the chance to take larger squads, though in general neither of those is a real sticking point for me. Overall, I think they're really quite a cool unit. I'm sure a lot of Chaos players will like to have some actual rules for their fancy special weapons, as opposed to having to proxy them as cultists. And I do wonder if in the future we might get some sort of more complete Traitor Guard army roster. Having a Brood Brothers style option for Imperial Guard for Chaos Marines would be quite fun. In any case, let me know what you think of the unit down in the comments below. Would you be tempted to run these guys over standard cultists? And if so, how might you use them and what weapons would you choose? I'll be looking forward to covering the other kill team datasheets very shortly. The Gellerpox Infected and Navy Breachers both seem really interesting, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics or just check back later if you'd like to see those. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to quickly mention that Element Games affiliate link that I've got down in the video description. If you live in the UK, Element Games usually does 15% off Games Workshop's products, so it's a fairly decent alternative to buying through them. If you click the link before buying anything, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics, and it doesn't cost you any more whatsoever when you buy. Can just be a way to help support if you were buying something anyway. Otherwise, if you're over in the USA, I do also have that Amazon link down there as well. That works in much the same way. Click the link, buy literally anything off Amazon, Warhammer or not, and a small amount goes to help support the channel. A massive thank you to all you guys who have been using those, it really does help out a bit. In any case, an absolutely enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.